And we are live. I am a few seconds late starting the stream. I do apologize. At least I think I'm a few seconds late. It was very weird because the YouTube timer said I had 4 minutes to go, and I'm just like, well, it'll take me about 2 minutes to make a cup of coffee. So it took me exactly 2 minutes to make my cup of coffee. I get back and it said, waiting for DistroTube to start any second. So we're talking under a minute. So they're 4 minutes, or my microwave's 2 minutes. Not the same. So I don't know. But I think I'm on time, or close enough. So those of you hanging out in the YouTube chat, give me a yay or a nay on the YouTube audio. All right. I am just previewing the stream to make sure my audio is working. All right. I hope everyone is doing okay today. So I did a live stream, just a solo live stream, Q&A live stream about 2 weeks ago, which I used to do these on a much more regular basis. And these days I don't do too many live streams. And the one I did a couple weeks ago, everybody was like, well, you need to do more of these. So I was trying to make an effort to occasionally do these, right? So I set aside some time this afternoon for this. Audio is only on left ear. I bet I can fix that. Give me just a second. Let's see. Audio, yep. Not set to mono for some reason. All right, for those of you wearing earbuds or headphones, left ear, right ear, both working. I microwave my coffee. No, I microwave water to boil the water. So, I mean, I guess I won't say I've never microwaved coffee, because sometimes I do get cups of coffee from like McDonald's in the morning or the gas station. Sometimes they get cold on you. If you throw them in the microwave for, 60 seconds or whatever, you can heat them back up a little bit. I often boil water, not just for coffee, but for tea, for a lot of things in the microwave. And it's really, one of the things I found out is how dangerous it can be sometimes boiling water in the microwave. Because you boil water in the microwave and you take, for example, a mug out and you've boiled the water. But it's usually not like rolling or bubbling. And you'll hit it with a spoon or a tea bag or whatever it is you're putting in this water, and it will just explode. It will just jump out of the cup, and it will burn the hell out of you if you're not prepared for it. Yeah, hearing it in both ears, using earbuds, yeah. So what it is I often have to fix that problem when I stream from the house. It's because I don't have everything set up here at home, as far as all my OBS scenes and everything. So I actually sync my settings from the office to the computer here, but I'm using a different camera, different mic, different audio interface, and all of that. So the settings that work at the office don't work here. So I always have to change them every time I do a stream here. Yeah, not in the office today. Yeah, I thought about trying to do this stream from the office, because there for a while I quit streaming from the office because the internet was an issue. There were some networking issues. There was a lot of construction around the office there for a while. They were redoing some of the cable lines and other utility things going on the street where my office building is. And I've been thinking that, I haven't noticed any internet issues, just me working at the office here in a few weeks. And I did want to actually test out the networking at the office, but I didn't want to risk it for today's stream. But I probably will in the next few days. Probably I won't even schedule it, because I don't want people to get their hopes up. I'll just start an impromptu stream for no reason, right? You won't get a notification or anything. I don't know, just me randomly doing something. And if the networking is working good at the office, I'll just keep doing that impromptu stream. If it doesn't, well, nothing was planned that day anyway, so no big deal, right? Yeah, microwaving the water makes sense. Yeah, you can actually boil water in about 2 minutes in a microwave. So it's really like with ramen noodles. I mean, you can boil water on the stove, but you can't boil water on the stove in 2 minutes. You can boil water in a microwave really quickly. But you do have to be careful because it'll look like the water is not boiling. And again, if you like you boil a cup of water and you put a cold spoon in it, and just the water will just blow up out of that cup. It'll boil over really quick. Yeah, the audio was briefly mono, now it's dual. Yeah, that's because OBS has a setting to make your audio mono, and I should have had that ticked on by default, and I didn't. So by default, it's only going to send it to one channel, right? That's why you get the weird left ear thing. But if you set your audio, your mic input to mono, then you get both ears going. Big Pod, he is in the chat. He says he just removed NixOS from his desktop and went back to Ubuntu and had quite some issues. You had some issues with NixOS, and that's why you moved to Ubuntu, or after you got to Ubuntu, you were having issues with Ubuntu, or maybe it was both. That is the thing with Linux. You have issues really with every distro. Yeah, Yusuf says, I installed DTOS on a vanilla Arch and dmenu-run. Didn't start with the key binding, but I copied it to user bin and it worked. So that particular script, the in my DTOS, it's called dm-run. And it is simply a bash script, and it's in your home directory .local/bin. Make sure it's executable. The other thing is make sure local bin is in your shell's path. That's one thing I may have not taken into account with DTOS. Local bin should be in everybody's path, but some people it might not be for some reason. If it's not, then like my xmonad config just expects you to be able to execute the command dm-run, and it'll run that script. But if local bin is not in your path, you actually have to change that binding in the xmonad config to the full path to that script. So let me show you that fix, because I know other people were having issues with DTOS. Oh, here is another issue with the config for OBS, because that was set up for the monitor set up at the office, and my 3 monitors here are in a different order. So give me just a second here. Get rid of some of these OBS scenes I won't be using today. Alright, so my xmonad config, you guys have seen this. If I go to the key binding section, and near the top of the key binding section, you're going to see this line right here. So mod shift return, right? Mod shift enter, super shift enter, and I have a description, run prompt, and it runs the command sequence underscore. The sequence underscore is a Haskell function that allows you to run 2 functions at the same time, meaning one function doesn't wait on the other, they run simultaneously, right? So sequence, and what is it? What are the 2 commands it's going to run at the same time? Spawn my sound player, so that is the startup sound, and then it's also going to spawn this here. .local/bin/dm-run. I actually have already added the full path to my xmonad config. I may not have updated that to DTOS yet. I may need to. But make sure that is actually set to the full path. If it's set to just dm-run without the full path, that could be your issue. So that is the fix for that. I haven't spent too much time on DTOS lately. I've had a lot of other stuff going on, real life stuff, and it's just a lot of work with all of my GitLab stuff. I get so many requests, and I just don't have time for it. It would take so much of that GitLab kind of stuff, projects, personal projects, would take up so much time, it actually would it makes it hard to do other stuff like doing video content. That's why I don't. That's why I've always resisted like making a distribution, for example. That's why for many years people asked, for a installation script like DTOS, and I told you guys I'd never do it because it would be too much work. It would get in the way of other things, and it has. So that's why I resisted for a long time. But eventually, people asked about it enough. I'll give it a shot. But it is hard keeping up with some of that stuff. I was hoping I'd just throw that stuff on the internet, and other people would fix bugs or fork it and do their own things with it rather than expecting me to support it. Because I'm just not interested in spending my time doing that, right? I don't really enjoy that. It's one of those things, you guys see me doing scripting, programming, nerdy stuff sometimes on camera, but I don't want to be a developer. I don't want to maintain a distro. I really don't want to develop software. That's never been something that really I thought I would enjoy or interest me that much. Yeah, Big Pod is going into the science of microwaves and water. He says it gets superheated, and until entropy is introduced, it won't boil. There you go. And NixOS was causing you issues, Big Pod, that were solved by installing Ubuntu. Okay. That's interesting you mentioned that, because the other day, 2 or 3 nights ago, I was here at the house, and I've installed so many distributions. The idea of distro hopping or experimenting with new distributions for fun, I've seen it all at this point. But I had actually was thinking, I haven't played with either Nix or Geeks in a while, so I actually spun up a virtual machine and ran through an installation of Geeks. And I almost installed Nix after I installed Geeks, just to have some virtual machines of them around. The Nix installation obviously doesn't take very long at all these days, because Nix now has the Calamares installer option as well. So it's much more like installing normal stuff like, Ubuntu, Manjaro, Linux Mint, those things that give you graphical installers. Where until just a few months ago, Nix was strictly a command line installation, or where you had to write your own Nix config and that Nix syntax, right? And then build the system with that. Geeks is still like that. I don't know if Geeks will ever get an installation script or a installer program that where you don't have to fool with writing that config file using Scheme. Yeah, Geeks is really cool. I agree. It's cool in concept. It's a distribution I would love to be able to run, but I don't think I ever could. I know I could never use it as a fully Linux Libre distribution, as a fully free distribution, because I've just got too much stuff, or as hardware, that requires proprietary drivers. And it's just one of those things, and it's not just a me problem, this is just a general computing problem. Very few of us, and that's all of you guys that are currently watching this, have computers that could run a fully free Linux distribution. It's just the nature of it. There's so much stuff, especially with laptops, right? It's very unlikely your laptop has a free driver out there. Most Wi-Fi drivers are proprietary. So, and then those of us that have NVIDIA cards, for my workstation at the office, it's AMD, but my computer here, NVIDIA. I'm not running the open source NVIDIA driver. There's no way that thing's garbage, right? I have to have the proprietary NVIDIA driver. So if I wanted to run Geeks, the only way I could run it is by running it with the non-free repos. And of course, that kind of defeats some of the purpose behind Geeks, because it's designed to be this GNU operating system, fully free as in freedom, right? Even though a lot of Geeks users probably, I don't know what the statistics are, but I suspect a large percentage of Geeks users probably do use the non-Geeks channel, the proprietary repositories, right? So that will get you the actual generic Linux kernel that's got all the proprietary bits in it, which you'd need for a lot of hardware. Get you those proprietary Wi-Fi drivers, which is really what prevents most people, probably the overwhelming majority of people that can't run a Free Software Foundation approved distribution, any of the FSF approved distributions like Geeks, like Triskel and Parabola and things like that. It's those Wi-Fi drivers, right? As soon as you try to install it on your laptop and realize you don't have internet, and you can never have internet, right? As long as you're running that fully free operating system, because there's no free driver. Yeah. Then what do? Well, you only have two options. Use a non-free distribution, because obviously that would work, because you get the proprietary drivers, or change the Wi-Fi chip in your laptop to one that has a free driver. And that's not an option for most people. Most people are not going to swap out hardware, especially hardware that they depend on, like my NVIDIA card. I'm not going to throw away a perfectly good NVIDIA card, especially if it's one that costs a lot of money, right? I'll just take that out and throw in something else that has a free driver. No, right? That's not, most people are not going to do that. I am pretty principled when it comes to free software versus proprietary software, but I'm not going to take a GPU that costs several $100s, throw it in the trash, and go buy another one that has a free driver just so I can run GNU Geeks, right? All right, back to the chat. See what anybody's got anything going on. Hey, DT, your views on Linux from scratch? I've never really fooled with Linux from scratch. I've downloaded the manual before and, looked at some stuff, and I mean, it's a nice educational tool. If you actually want to learn how to build Linux from the ground up, it could be worth it, especially if you're one of those people that are interested in maybe eventually maintaining a Linux distribution yourself. And it would be beneficial to kind of know how it starts from the ground up. That could be interesting. As far as Linux from scratch is a distribution you use, that's not what it's designed for. It's not what it's intended for, and it's not something you're going to make happen, right? So Linux from scratch is not a distribution you go and install and then you run it, and then you tell people, I use Linux from scratch, by the way. No, that's not, don't think it's that, right? It's strictly just it's an instruction manual you go through to learn. And then once you've done it, right? But it's not the distribution you install on physical hardware. Typically, you install it in a virtual machine is typically how most people will do it. No reason to install it on physical hardware, because after it's installed, you're not going to do anything with it, typically. Let's see. Martin builds from source. He says, have you considered to run Gentoo on your main machine? I find Gentoo really fascinating to run as a distro. Would love to hear your opinion on it. Is it worth going through the trouble? I don't find Gentoo worth the trouble, to be honest. For somebody like me, Gentoo, if you're going to run it, you have to have... You can't have as many programs installed on a computer as I do. I literally, on my Arch machines, because all the window managers and programming languages and various libraries for things, because I try out so much different stuff, I've got over 2,000 packages installed through Pacman on my Arch machines. Imagine all of those packages on a Gentoo machine. They have to compile, right? Imagine the updates. My computer would be constantly updating because it takes so long for some of this stuff to compile. By the time I get through one update, it's time to start compiling for the next update. And it's just not worth it. Depending on what kind of equipment you're running to. If you're running underpowered equipment, Gentoo would be horrible because the compilation times would be extremely long. Gentoo is great if you're building a really, really minimal system. Obviously, because of the things I do, I'm never going to build a really minimal system. And by minimal, I mean the people that run through the base Gentoo installation, which isn't hard. It's like an Arch install. It takes longer because you got to wait for all the stuff to compile. But you run through the base Gentoo installation, you get Xorg up and running, and then you install a really minimal window manager. A great option would be DWM, because DWM, you don't have to worry about long compilation times or anything, right? Typically, you don't even worry about installing that with the package manager portage on Gentoo, you typically just handle that yourself, right? On all distributions, typically you don't install DWM through the package manager. You just go and grab the source from suckless, you edit the config, and then sudo make install, and you're done, right? That's what a lot of people would do on Gentoo. A base installation with Xorg, DWM, and some of the other really small suckless utilities. Yeah, Gentoo would be fine for that because then you don't have much on your system, not much to compile. But the kind of systems that probably most people watching this video right now have, they would hate Gentoo. It would be a really annoying. It would be a learning experience for some people if you've never experienced a source-based distribution, and then you learn all about the use flags and everything on Gentoo. Like, that's fascinating. But then actually having to live in it, again, for the right person, it could be great. For a lot of people, and I would say most people, I would say 95% of desktop Linux users would not be happy on Gentoo at all. That doesn't make Gentoo a bad distribution. It's just Gentoo is not meant to be a distribution for everybody, right? It's a kind of a niche distribution. It's targeting a certain kind of crowd. It's not trying to be a jack of all trades. Yeah, Jan says, I went from Gentoo to Ubuntu since I was getting too lazy for. Yeah, that is a common path that a lot of people take. A lot of people start with a lot of the standard kind of beginner distributions that, people tell you your first distribution, just go install Ubuntu or Linux Mint or whatever it happens to be. These days you see a lot of people recommend things like Manjaro even, which is a rolling release distribution, but pretty new user friendly. And then people start going down other paths. Well, let me explore some of the more hardcore stuff. I'll install mainline Arch, and then I'll install Gentoo. And then maybe I'll play with Slackware for a little while. And then some of these distributions, like I talked about earlier, Nix and Geeks, are kind of fascinating. And then once you've gone through that phase and you realize, well, some of these other distributions I've been playing with, they were neat. I learned some stuff. But man, some of this stuff is work. Let me go back to what I originally started with, which, if it was Ubuntu or Mint, you see that with a lot of people. That they start with a distribution and then they drift away from it. They go somewhere else, sometimes for years, and then they end up back on the distribution they started with. Any picture of you with hair? No. I don't have any pictures of me with hair. I don't have any pictures of me. I haven't had hair since I was about a full head of hair, like long enough to comb and actually have a proper hairstyle of any kind, since I was about 22. So, and I'm 45 now, so I don't have. Yeah, I'd have to go find some pictures from like high school, crap like that, and obviously that would be stuff so long ago. I don't have anything like that laying around. Let's see. Darwin, do you play any instruments? Yes, Darwin. You can actually see me play musical instruments on this channel. I used to do it sometimes on live streams. We're not going to, well, I guess I could do it today. We may. I actually haven't played any instrument in a while. Probably weeks, if not months. But if you go to my channel, give me a second. Go to the YouTube channel and go to the tabs. I don't know. I don't think I have a music playlist. Let's go to playlist. I might have it in a playlist. I know I have enough of them. I probably could have made a playlist. I do have a off-topic playlist, going a bit off-topic. And if you click on that, I don't want to play anything. But yeah, there's some of the music stuff. Because there is me playing the recorder, there's me playing the trombone, there's me singing the free software song as a duet with Richard Stallman, and there is me doing the freestyle rap. If you're looking for something kind of serious, where I'm kind of showing off some skills, like actually trying to play in a serious way, check out that recorder video where I play through a 4-movement handle sonata on the alto recorder. But I actually went to school for music. I have some music degrees. The trombone is my main instrument. A little hard to play the trombone on a live stream. Haven't actually picked up my trombone in a few months. I'd actually have to take a week or two to get in shape to play the trombone. Because there is some physical demands playing a brass instrument. There's some muscular things going on with your mouth or whatever. It's a little weird if you haven't played for a while and then get back into it, whether it, trumpet, trombone, tuba, whatever brass instruments you play. Because it's weird because your lips have to vibrate, right? You put your lips together and buzz, right, through the mouthpiece into the brass instrument. And that's a weird sensation. If you haven't been doing it all the time, if you play on a regular basis, it's normal. You don't, there's nothing weird about it. But if you haven't done it in a few months, and then I started playing today, my lips would get this weird tingly sensation. They'd also get really tight after playing for a few minutes because you haven't used those muscles. You haven't put that kind of pressure on the corners of your mouth and on your lips, especially where you make that buzz, that tight buzzing sound. Just like anything else, right? It's just like any muscle. If you haven't used them in a while, you're going to be pretty weak. I'd have to spend a couple of weeks of playing at least a few minutes every day, 15, 20 minutes every day for a couple of weeks to really get back into the kind of shape where I could really play something. Yeah, if you search DistroTube hair on the web, prepare to die laughing with the first picture. I know 2 pictures. Yeah, probably the 2 pictures you're talking about. Of course, you're talking about a specific one. There's actually 2. There's one where somebody was starting a petition on change.org. He was trying to, there was enough money donated when they were going to get me to grow hair. I don't even know how that got posted on change.org, but it's me with this long flowing head of hair. And the other one is me with like facial tattoos and pink and yellow hair. I've got 6'9" tattooed like across my forehead. I don't know if that's somebody famous. I guess it is. But it was a really weird picture. But you guys are pretty impressive with your GIMP skills. I'm assuming you use GIMP and not Photoshop for that. I hope you did. You look like a bass player. That's from Hadari. Yeah, I don't play any stringed instruments, unfortunately. I wish I was a bass player. I like the bass. You talking about the upright bass or bass guitar? Maybe you're talking about the bass trombone. I do play the bass trombone. Actually, I don't own one, but I have played it. All the trombones I have, I own 3 or 4 of them. They're all tenor trombones, though. Some of them large bore, some of them small bore. I even have one valve trombone, which is kind of interesting. It'd be interesting to do something with the valve trombone with some jazz bands or something. And I own an alto trombone, a little tiny alto as well, which is sometimes needed playing in the orchestra. A lot of the first trombone parts in the orchestra are actually written for alto rather than tenor. Yeah, 69011. Yeah, I don't know who that is, but yeah, they were trying to give me that guy's tattoos and hairstyle. AB says, DT, do a reaction video to interview with a GNU/Linux user by the channel programmers are also human. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure what you're trying to do. Do a reaction video to an interview with a GNU/Linux user by the channel. Okay, the channel name is Programmers Are Also Human. Okay. I'll have to check that video out. As far as reaction videos, that's not something I typically do. So. I usually don't react to other people's videos. It's not something I find interesting. To be honest, it's kind of lazy content too. I'm just gonna turn on something I've never seen before and let's watch it. I'll record it, right? Which I don't mind doing occasional fluff kind of content, lazy kind of content, but that seems exceptionally lazy. I don't know. Probably not something I'd want to get into. Plus, when you react to other people's content, what if it's something that I just think is garbage? I hate everything that they say, hate everything about the video, and would I really want to say that on camera? Probably not. Not usually the kind of person I am, right? That's not trashing other people's content. That's not me. Try to keep things more civil, right? I think that's one of the reasons why we have such a great community around this channel. Because I try to keep things civil, so for the most part, you guys try to keep things civil. If you go look at the people that really love to be angry on camera, just angry in general about it doesn't matter the topic of the channel, Linux channels, whatever, tech channels, channels about kittens, whatever, anime, gaming channels. The ones that act like complete jackasses on camera, look at the communities around their channel. It's usually pretty bad. It's like, well, if he can act that way, I can act that way, right? One of the things, for those of you thinking of starting a YouTube channel or video content channel on any platform, or even an audio podcast or whatever it happens to be, you do have to be aware of how you act on camera, and hopefully your natural personality just comes across on camera. Like naturally in real life, I don't get angry, right? It would take a lot for me to get physically angry at something or someone, short of maybe somebody actually physically putting their hands on me, but then that's not really me getting angry. That's just a normal kind of instinctual response, right? That's somebody, if somebody attacks you, yes, and then obviously you have to put a can of whoop ass on them, right? Open up a can. But just people talking or just people acting in ways that maybe some people find annoying. And some people, all they do is bitch and moan about things all day that are happening around them in life. And I don't understand people like that. People that will sit at home and all they do is watch cable news and all the crap that's going on in the world and all that political garbage that's going on in the world. And they sit there and they hear all these stories that are designed just to get people mad. That's all that's on cable news, especially, right? They're not just trying to just relay everyday mundane news, right? They're going with hot stories that are going to get people mad, people upset, and there'll be people sitting there all day just for that. They want to get upset, and then they want to call their friends. Did you see this story about this? It made me upset. I want you to get angry as well. That's why I'm telling you about it. They want to spread all of this negativity. And if you're one of those kinds of people, you should think about why you're like that. And should actively try not to be that way. And one of the things with getting rid of all that negativity like that is not being around other negative people. So that's pretty much why I turned off the TV years ago, right? I don't have a TV, right? One of the reasons I'm not on certain forms of social media, like Twitter, for example, there's nothing there that's positive in any way, right? So why would I want to be there? That kind of stuff is only going to bring you down if you're trying not to be a negative person. Now, if you want to be a negative person and you want to get down in the mud and sling it with everybody else, yeah, Twitter is great. uh, again, and I'm not going to judge people that do enjoy that and want to be like that. I'm not like that. But your that kind of personality does come across on camera. I see some YouTubers, just like you guys. I occasionally will watch YouTube videos. I don't spend a lot of time watching YouTube, and typically the YouTube stuff I watch has nothing to do with tech or Linux or anything because of all the stuff I do on my channel, right? I'm not interested in watching other people's Linux content. I do so much Linux content. In my free time, I'll watch other stuff. But as a YouTuber, naturally, I see things that people are doing with their content. And I think, oh, that's great. I like how he did that. I don't like how he did that, right? I can critique, sometimes take stuff from other people as far as people that really are good at YouTube and know what they're doing with their production, titles, and thumbnails and stuff like that. And then you can see the people that have absolutely no idea what they're doing. And I think the biggest mistake that some people make is just turning on a camera and then being angry. like they don't realize that people in real life, sometimes you have to be around angry people, friends, family. If you work at a job, you can't just walk out because other people are angry around you, right? You just stuck with that. Online, you don't have to be around people like that. So these people that act just crazy on camera, and when you start pissing people off, right, or you're just negative in such a way that I'm starting to become negative, well, I can turn off YouTube, right, or I can switch to a different video. So yeah, as one of the pitfalls, I see a lot of people, because I see people that really grind on YouTube, that put out a lot of content. Kind of people that, hey, they've been doing it for a year or two. They've made 100, 200 videos. They're putting in the work. They don't get hardly any views. And you think, why is this person putting in all this work? They look like they're doing the right things. And then I turn on one of their videos and I see how they act on camera. And then oh, now I know why nobody's watching this guy. Tech Hut is in the chat. Guys, go check out Tech Hut's channel. Does some excellent, not just Linux content, but just tech in general. But he does a lot of Linux content. Very good channel. The Linux Tube says, I hate to be negative. There was a distro I reviewed, and I was a negative review. Yeah, so I held back, never posted. I have done that many, many times. I've probably reviewed 200-300 Linux distributions on my channel, right? And of course, I'll critique them. But as far as generally being to the point where I'm really negative, like this distribution is pissing me off, and I got some really nasty things to say about it, that's only happened 3 or 4 times, really. And those, I don't like doing that, and I typically would never do that. But it was just something that just happened kind of on camera. Like this distribution really pissed me off to the point where I said something on camera, but I already kind of recorded. I already plan on making the video. I'll push the video out, but I don't put those videos out. I have went into planning on making certain distro reviews probably 40 or 50 times in the last 5 years, the history of the channel, where I started recording and then I just turned off the camera and didn't. I already knew how it was going to go, because once again, I don't like trashing people's free and open source projects, because many of these distributions or pieces of software, whatever it happens to be, these guys are working on, sometimes it's very small teams, usually just one person working on something, right? And this is just a passion project for them. Sometimes it's not really meant to be stable, right? Like enterprise quality software that everybody should be running. It's just, hey, I felt like doing this because I'm going to learn something. If I build this, I'll put it on my GitHub or my GitLab. If people want to use it, go check it out. It's that kind of thing. And I don't want to trash people for that. That would be unfair on my part to trash people for those kinds of projects. I actually, in the last month, I actually downloaded 2 different Linux ISOs for distributions I had never taken a look at before. I thought about doing a installation and first look on camera, recording a video, and I did. I started recording a video on 2 different Linux distributions at different days in the last month. And I realized there's no way I could put this on camera because the distributions had some issues. It didn't look good. Even if I didn't trash it on camera, it just wouldn't be a good look for these projects. One of them was a kind of a new project, and it was more, even though it wasn't really labeled as a beta, you could tell it's kind of beta quality software. And it's like that. They wouldn't enjoy me putting out this video, even though it's a small project and probably could use some press to get people interested in it. I didn't want to show it in its current state, and the other one I took a look at was even more of a train wreck because I couldn't actually get it to properly install. And like I said, that's probably happened 50 times in the history of the channel where I planned a day. I'm going to do this video on this particular distribution or this particular release of a distribution, and it didn't work out for some reason. Either it was just a complete train wreck, wouldn't install properly, or after I get it installed, it's a complete crash fest. And usually that is okay as far as at least I didn't waste too much time. But then some of them do kind of half-ass install correctly, and I'm trying to do things. And then as I'm recording, I get into the recording, then problems start appearing. Weird graphical glitches or certain programs crash. It's not like every program crashes. It's just certain ones, and sometimes it's the most important ones, like your graphical package manager just doesn't work, right? And then it's like, well, do I really want to put this out there for the public? This distribution where, the most important package, especially for newer Linux users, is installing software, removing software, updating their system, is the package manager, right? If your package manager, your software center, is broken completely, is unusable, I'm not putting that out there, right? I would just feel like a complete asshole putting that out there, knowing that the developer, the maintainer of that project, is going to get flooded with issues, or sometimes just people making nasty, snarky comments about, oh, your distribution is garbage, it's broke, I don't want to do that to folks. So actually, one of the reasons why I don't do a lot of distribution reviews anymore, a lot of those kinds of installation and first look videos, is one thing, I've installed just about everything at some point or another. They get kind of boring for me personally, but also so many of these distribution releases, they just don't work. They're not ready. And I almost never go and grab a beta, right? These are all actual distribution releases, right? And so many of them don't install correctly, or they do install correctly, and as soon as you get into them, things are just a complete crash fest. It happens so much more than what you guys realize, because again, I probably made like 300 distro reviews on this channel. There was probably another 50 that I planned to make that I couldn't make, or I just didn't want to make because of how bad things were going on camera. That's one of the things about the title of today's stream. My thoughts about Linux today. Stability is still an issue, but it's not necessarily stability is still an issue. Stability is still an issue for small distributions. I never worry about installing Ubuntu or Fedora or OpenSUSE or Debian. I never worry about installing those and thinking, is it going to install properly? After it installs, are things going to start randomly crashing? And because those distributions obviously have large teams. Some of them have large corporations behind them. It's really those one-man bands, right? Or those very small distributions that have one, maybe 2 or 3 people behind them. And unfortunately, a lot of times we try to put those distributions on the same level, on the same playing field as a distribution like, Debian or Mint or something like that, and they're just not, right? Let's see. Yeah, Martin says, since the launch of Fedora 36, a lot of people have switched to Fedora and have a lot of good things to say about it. You made a video about Fedora 36. Was it that impressive to you as well? The last 2 or 3 releases of Fedora have been okay. The last time I used Fedora on physical hardware, as far as trying to run it myself, it has been about 3 years ago, and it was fine. I could use it. I made some videos, not about me using Fedora, but like my everyday work, I was constantly putting out new video content. I was actually running Fedora. I think I ran it for like a month about 3 years ago. I didn't talk about it on the channel at all. That was back when I often hopped on physical hardware. There was a period there 1 year, 3, maybe 4 years ago, where there was like a 6-month period where I hopped a lot on my main physical machine. I don't remember why. Probably like so many people that distro hop, you run into these little bugs, these little issues. This isn't quite working. This piece of software isn't quite working. This piece of hardware isn't quite working on this, and then you think, well, let me hop, and it'll fix that problem. But then the distribution you hop to has a new problem that you didn't have in the other distribution. But you can't go back to the other distribution because it had that problem. So you go to the next distribution, and there was a period of about 6 months where like it seemed like every 2 to 4 weeks I was on a different distribution. I hopped to like, I don't know, 8, 10 different distributions in like a 6-month period. And eventually that's when I eventually ended up on Arco and have kind of stayed on Arco since then. Like, you know what, Arco, I installed it, it's working. It's not like Arco's perfect, everything's going to have little bugs that crop up. But hopping doesn't solve any problems, right? It's not like there's a magical distribution out there where you're never going to have anything break. That's fantasy land. There's no operating system. There's no just general software out there, right? Just where one day you're going to wake up, everything running on your computer, all of your software is just always going to work all the time. Nothing's ever going to break. That is this really nice utopian fantasy. But that's all it is. That's fantasy, right? I think that's the whole reason why so many people distro hop. Is they're looking for something that doesn't exist, right? They're looking for that unicorn distribution where everything just magically works and will never break, no matter what you do to it. I promise you, I've broken every distribution I've ever tried. Yeah, DT OpenSUSE Tumbleweed is very stable when tweaked. That's from Shape-Shifting Dragon. Yeah. I'm sure OpenSUSE Tumbleweed is fine. I haven't actually tried it on physical hardware as far as, running it long term or anything. But OpenSUSE seems like a fine distribution. You don't see too many people talk about OpenSUSE anymore. It seems like it used to be a lot more popular way back in the day. It's one of the things that has changed over the years of me using Linux. The first time I ever knew what Linux was and started using Linux, I've been using it on web servers since the 90s, right? Back then, typically most web servers were running Red Hat or Debian. Kind of like today, right? It's not too different today. Although now it's Red Hat or Debian, but you also have a lot of Red Hat based and Debian based server distributions, because you had CentOS and now things like Rocky and Alma Linux for the Red Hat crowd. And then, Debian stable is still great on servers, but a lot of people now prefer Ubuntu LTS server because Ubuntu does a lot of really nice stuff with their server distribution. But on the desktop, I started running Linux as my desktop operating system, strictly. No Windows, no Mac, right? For about 15 years ago. And in those 15 years, so much has changed from then. Like when I first switched from Windows XP to Ubuntu. And Ubuntu, of course, was by far the most popular Linux desktop distribution. That's kind of still the case even after all of these years, right? But back then it was even more so, it seemed, because Ubuntu really was kind of I wouldn't say it was the first distribution that was easy to install, but they did it in such a way. They had this clean, polished distribution with a nice looking desktop with all the compiz effects, and that was really the catalyst for a lot of people to finally give Linux a shot on the desktop. And some of the other popular distributions, if you weren't running Ubuntu back then, OpenSUSE was kind of popular back then. There was Mandrake and Mandriva, which, it was Mandrake originally, then became Mandriva. What other popular distributions? I mean, Fedora was around back then, but Fedora, I wouldn't say was a popular distribution. Debian definitely wasn't that popular on the desktop. Arch Linux was around, and you even had the old Arch by the way crowd back then, but Arch was not as popular back then. Arch has really kind of exploded in popularity, I would say, really in the last 5 or 6 years. And I think a lot of it has to do with Manjaro, which, again, Manjaro wasn't around when so many distributions that are popular now weren't around when I switched to Linux, right? Manjaro and MX, Linux Mint had just got started, but it was just getting off the ground. Endeavor wasn't around, of course. Deepin. You go to the Distro Watch Top 10. Let's go to the Distro Watch Top 10 and see what was around when I switched to Linux. This could be interesting. Do a blast from the past here. Of course, I could actually go back some years because you can adjust the page hits, but I mean, I know when pretty much all these distributions got started, so MX, Endeavor, Mint might have been around when I got started. Manjaro, Pop OS, Garuda, none of those were around when I started on the desktop. We go even further. Instead of the top 10, top 20, Linux Lite wasn't around, Zorin wasn't around, KDE Neon wasn't around, Elementary wasn't around, Annex I don't think was around, PC Linux was, Kali I don't think was around, Alma wasn't. Blackware's been around since the dinosaurs roamed the earth. Arco Linux wasn't around. So of the top 20, probably 12 of these distributions didn't even exist, when I started with Linux. So the landscape does change, right? And we're not talking about a crazy amount of time, 15 years. That's a long time to be running Linux, but and you guys, probably many of you guys have been running Linux that longer. Certainly many of you guys are just switched to Linux in the last few years, but is it hard to imagine you'll still be running Linux, 5, 10, 15 years into the future? No. Right? You can imagine that. And guess what? The way things look right now with Linux will look completely different 5, 10, 15 years into the future, just like it looks completely different for me now compared to back then. When I switched, well, let's talk about some of these distributions. Actually, let's go to, is it sorted by year? So I switched, I would say, of course, I experimented, virtual machines and on some test equipment, but actually full-time switched to Linux on the desktop, 2008. Let's pick that for a year. And, the most popular distributions, according to page hit rankings on DistroWatch, which don't amount to anything because they don't really measure anything that's really worth measuring. People clicking on pages is not an accurate way to measure anything. But it's safe to assume Ubuntu way with most popular distribution, probably 10 times the users of everything else combined, like easily, even though the page hit rankings. OpenSUSE is kind of close. No, it wasn't. Not because even back then, I can tell you, just talking with people in the Linux community, being much more involved online in the Linux community, OpenSUSE was more popular than it is now, I would say, but it definitely was not remotely as popular as Ubuntu. And Linux Mint was kind of new back then, right? It probably only been around a year or two, and it's already the third most popular distribution. And back then, Mint, a lot of people criticized Mint back then because it was seen as Ubuntu with some multimedia codecs installed. And that's kind of how it started. There's a little more involved in it, but when Mint started, it was really more of a fork of Ubuntu, because Ubuntu, for legal reasons, and most distributions back then, would not ship multimedia codecs already on their ISOs during the installation because they were afraid of getting sued, especially distributions that had corporations behind them, like Ubuntu with Canonical. Right? They don't want to take that chance, right? But Mint, being a community distribution, wouldn't care, right? So Mint was basically, we're going to basically ship Ubuntu with the multimedia codecs. And that was nice for people that it, depended on those multimedia codecs. But then, of course, you get a lot of the more geeky nerds who know how to install the multimedia codecs on Ubuntu anyway. It's like, well, why does Mint need to be around? Because I can just install it myself. You always get that kind of crowd. Kind of like when Ubuntu got started, a lot of people would make the same criticisms, even though it was much less obvious with Ubuntu, because Ubuntu did differ quite a bit from Debian, but a lot of people in the early days of Ubuntu made the same comparison. Like, why would you need to run Ubuntu? You can just run Debian. Ubuntu's just Debian with some brown theming at the time, right? Some brown wallpaper. Well, I wouldn't say that was true for Ubuntu or Mint, those criticisms. I think those criticisms were a little unfair. Definitely now, looking back at it so many years later, Ubuntu and Debian they're not the same distribution, right? Ubuntu is based on Debian. That's technically true. But Ubuntu, of course, their repository, it's not Debian's repository, right? They maintain their own repositories of software. Yeah, they build their packages based off the Debian repository packages, but it's not the same, right? The cadence of everything is not the same. So you can't really say Ubuntu and Debian are the same distribution. Like, anybody that's ever run the two would agree with that. Ubuntu and Debian are not the same, right? And increasingly, I would say Mint and Ubuntu over the years have gotten to the point where they don't have as many similarities. Now, Mint still uses the Ubuntu repositories, so yeah, there's a lot of fundamentally Ubuntu stuff going on in Mint. But it's especially with the desktop environments, that's really where Mint has kind of focused on their work with Cinnamon and Mate especially. And really, I think having your own desktop environment, your own custom desktop environment that you created from the ground up, such as the Cinnamon desktop from the Mint team, I think you can definitely say that Mint is not just another Ubuntu, right? They're doing some different stuff. This is not just another Ubuntu spin, right? ABS, DT, remember how bad Unity was when it was first launched? Yes. I actually ran the development releases of Ubuntu for that version with Unity, the first version of Unity, which was Ubuntu 11.04. And as soon as the alphas came out, as soon as you could switch to the development repos, I started running it. And that was crazy. That thing was so buggy. And this is not the release, right? Of course it had bugs. This was really alpha quality software. And I was trying to run it as my distribution. Oh, I had to reinstall so many times. Things were breaking constantly. But I found Unity kind of interesting, what they were trying to accomplish with it. But that was easily, even when it was released, Ubuntu 11.04 was easily, to this day, I think pretty much everybody that was around then would agree, was the buggiest version of Ubuntu ever released. And it's not even close. I don't, occasionally people will talk about, some of the releases of Ubuntu coming out these days. This is a little buggy. I don't like this. This is, no. 11.04, with that very first release of the Unity desktop, was just wickedly bad. It wasn't wickedly bad as far as the desktop environment. What they created was nice, with the global menu and the side panel, the traditional Unity look that everybody came to enjoy. It's just, there were a lot of bugs, a lot of crashes, a lot of broken packages. When things got updated, sometimes the updates would break things. Because it was such a change going from GNOME 2, which was the desktop they'd been using, to Unity. And of course, by then, GNOME 2 was a dead project, and GNOME has already started transitioning to GNOME 3. And then you've got all of these GNOME suite of applications also becoming something new, and then you've got your own alpha quality desktop environment, Unity, with these alpha quality apps from the GNOME team as well, because they're going off in their own direction, but you're going to use some of their apps. You're not going to use their desktop environment, but you're going to use their suite of applications because you like the GTK applications, right? It was just a nightmare. That was a bad time to be a desktop Linux user, if I'm being honest. I would not want people that were switching to Linux who have been around in 2011 and had to deal with, that would have been the very first versions of Unity, the very first version of GNOME 3, the creation of Cinnamon, which was buggy as hell in the beginning. There was some bad desktop environments around that time. And I wasn't a desktop environment user. I didn't mind looking at them and testing them out, like, Unity on Ubuntu back then. But I was logging into my window managers to actually do stuff, right? Because even when I first switched to Linux, I became strictly a desktop or a window manager user. I really didn't live in desktop environments. Pretty much as soon as I switched to Linux in 2008, I discovered OpenBox, and that was the first window manager that I started using and loved it. And shortly after that, I discovered the awesome window manager. I think was the first tiling window manager. And that was shortly after, I got tired of playing with OpenBox for a few months, and I discovered Awesome, and it was awesome. And then shortly after that, I discovered Xmonad. Now, Xmonad was actually one of the first window managers that I got into, which is kind of strange because Xmonad is probably not a great, new user kind of window manager. But I'd probably been using Linux for a couple of years by that point, as far as on the desktop full time, by the time I got to Xmonad. And then from there, I just kept window manager hopping all the time, right? I went from OpenBox to Awesome to Xmonad, and then I think after that, I got tired of Xmonad for a while and went back to OpenBox to do the floating window manager thing again. And then after that, I discovered Qtile. That was kind of early days for Qtile. Nobody knew anything about Qtile, Really nobody knew about Qtile until I started this YouTube channel about 5 years ago, right? But I'm talking about, I was using Qtile 8, 9, maybe 10 years ago. And even back then it was good. It was really a nice, stable window manager. I couldn't understand why nobody knew about it, which was one of the reasons why when I finally started a YouTube channel, even you go back and look at some of my oldest videos, very quickly in the channel's history, I started talking about Qtile as a tiling window manager because it was just one of those things. I genuinely did not understand why everybody wasn't using this window manager. Why doesn't anybody even know about it? Back to the chat here. Yeah, I know I missed a lot of chat. I do apologize, guys. Yeah, Qtile is a lot. Yeah, Qtile is great. See, Alex says, thank you for getting into tiling window managers. Some may say noob status, but I've been using Awesome for the last 2 years. Awesome is awesome. Awesome is great because even just out of the box, Awesome, if you didn't want to configure it, you can use it, right? It's pretty much kind of a floating window manager out of the box. It's got title bars and window decoration. You can drag the windows around and all of that. Got the right-click menu, kind of like OpenBox, and it's got a panel already set up with some widgets and everything. Like, Awesome is great because you literally can just use it, right? As soon as you install it, which is not something most tiling window managers can say, right? Most tiling window managers you can't use just after you install it. You have to spend some time configuring some stuff, installing some other programs to go with it. Got a couple of super chats here. Let's get into these here. So RJ, he writes, "Hey DT, what are your thoughts on Manifest v3, and will this convince people to switch to Firefox open source Firefox alternatives?" I don't know what Manifest v3 is. Give me just a sec. I got my caps lock on for some reason. All right. Okay, so that's the web extensions, the next iteration of web extensions. Okay. Yeah, not being a web dev, obviously I don't follow a lot of that, so I don't know too much about it. Now, will this convince people to switch to Firefox and open source Firefox alternatives? Would most people care? I mean, I love free and open source software and I promote it all the time, right? But were you talking about, especially, you can't think of this in terms of Linux, because most computer users are not using Linux, right? They're using proprietary operating systems, which typically ship with their proprietary default web browser, which is typically Chrome, but it could be Safari, right, on some operating systems. And are these users even aware that Firefox exists? Are these users even aware that open source is a thing when you're talking about, So no, I wouldn't think. Like, it would be hard to get the masses, just the general population, to ever think, oh, I should consider open source. They don't know what open source is. No one's ever told them, right? Until you've been told by somebody exactly what free and open source software is, you don't even know it's a thing. As far as, should people switch to Firefox or to open source Firefox forks, like LibreWolf, for example. I love LibreWolf. I've got it installed on all my computers as well. Most of the time you guys see me in Chrome, but if I open up LibreWolf, I've got the same extensions and everything. I can actually do everything in LibreWolf. Just all my OBS scenes are set up. Like if I want to capture a browser window without any borders or anything, I've got it set up to do that with Brave rather than LibreWolf. So that's typically why on camera you guys see me use Brave, but I could use LibreWolf, and you'd never know the difference for the most part, as far as they do the same thing as far as all the ad blocking, privacy kind of stuff. The privacy defaults in LibreWolf are great. Should people use those? I think people should consider using those, as far as if it's something you're interested in. If you're looking for, especially a Firefox browser that's not Mozilla Firefox, for some reason, Firefox isn't cutting it for you, or you have serious issues with some of the directions maybe Mozilla's taking, or you just want something that's community driven for the most part. Yeah, LibreWolf. I would definitely tell people to check that out. I think you'll be impressed with it. I got off on a rather long tangent there. There was another super chat. I do apologize. Chris, he writes in, "Hey DT, what are your thoughts on Microsoft's Pluton and how it will affect Linux in the future?" Microsoft Pluton. I'm not sure what that is. I've heard it. Let me get a refresher on this. Oh, the secure processor. Yeah. How this will affect Linux in the future. It's one of the things when they do these things, when these new technologies that Microsoft invents, right? Microsoft is the dominant operating system as far as desktop computers, laptops, personal computing, right? Being that, when they come out with something, they can just go with it. They don't have to consider what happens with Linux or any other operating system, whether it be the BSDs or whatever, because computers for the most part, are going to be shipped with Windows. That's just the case, right? The people that want to install an alternative operating system, you guys figure out how to do that. The open source crowd, especially, because Microsoft knows about Linux and open source, right? You guys will figure out how to make your stuff work with our technology, right? It's always been the case when UEFI first came on the scene, right? Linux did not play well with UEFI, right? That was a problem because Microsoft came up with the secure boot stuff with Windows in mind, right? And it in the early days it made it very difficult, for example, to install another operating system on that computer. For example, if you wanted a dual boot, that was there for a few months. You had to jump through some hoops to get some of that stuff accomplished, but we worked it out. One of the things is Linux is so much bigger now than it was just a few years ago even. Nowadays, it doesn't matter what gets thrown at the Linux community. We're going to figure it out, right? So I wouldn't worry about how Microsoft Pluton, how it's going to affect Linux in the future. I don't think it's going to affect it at all. Positive, negatively. I think it's a non-issue. Let's see. I think that was all the super chats I caught up on. All right. Yeah, LibreWolf does great work, says Reggie. I would agree. LibreWolf, I think, is one of the best browsers on the market right now. I recently did a video of my top 5 open source web browsers. And I think in that top 5, I had Brave and LibreWolf as 1 and 2. I think everybody should, if you haven't tried either or both of those, install them. Install both. Check them out. What's in your cup, DT? This is just black coffee here. So if you were expecting like a shot of bourbon or anything, it's too early for that, right? Titan Finger. Hey, DT, what's your thoughts on the new split keyboard Paracorder 1 in comparison to the Moonlander? I have not heard of that particular keyboard, I don't think. Let me pull up a picture before I start lying and say I don't know what you're talking about. Because sometimes I actually do get pictures, see pictures of people with their keyboarders. This Paracorder Lite, but you were asking about the 1. Click on it. Oh, wow. That it? No, I definitely hadn't seen that. I would have noticed that one. I'm not going to lie. I haven't read anything about this yet. I already want one. Oh. I'm not saying for real that I'm going to buy one. But I probably would. I don't know. Is it shipping yet? Worldwide shipping. $299, a $300 keyboard, but that's par for the course for these kinds of things. There's some development costs and things that go into these kinds of things. I mean, I paid nearly $300 for my Moonlander. I paid nearly $300 for the Ergo Docks. I also have the Easy Plank as well. It wasn't $300, but it was, you know, for that little 47 key keyboard, I think I paid $160 or something like that for the Plank. I forget what the cost was, but yeah, I would be interested in that. Let's see. It's too bad LibreWolf isn't available for Android. Yeah, so that's one of the things about mobile phone browsers is Brave is available. And, you know, blocks all the ads and tracking and everything on mobile just like it does on the desktop. It's one of the things that's cool about Brave is that you can use it on all of your devices. I think when I made that top 5 open source browser video, I think that's why I put Brave 1 and LibreWolf 2. It's because LibreWolf isn't quite as a cross-platform. as Brave is. Yeah, Alex says, wow, that keyboard looks interesting. I can't see me using or getting used to it, though. It's a little weird. I like weird things, though. And I don't mind weird keyboards, obviously, so. Yeah, I'm too set in my QWERTY ways to change to anything else at this point. Yeah, I'm not too set in my ways. I could change. It's just, once you get into certain workflows, like I'm so dependent, for example, on the Vim key bindings. In Vim and Emacs, and really so many other applications. Used to HJKL and all of that stuff. And then when you start getting into other keyboard layouts where no longer those 4 keys are right next to each other, that could be a problem, right? That would be my biggest issue. Other than that, I mean, I could probably switch to any keyboard layout you want, spend a couple of weeks, kind of get used to it. It's like anything else. You spend some time with something, you pick it up pretty quick. If you put in some effort. A lot of people imagine things are harder than they are, especially anything that involves a change, right? Change is hard. Change is difficult. Most people like to resist change. But I promise you, even as crazy as something like this looks, I bet you could get used to it pretty quickly. I'll give you a great example. My trackball mice that I use. All I use is a trackball. Now, when I switched to it from a regular mouse, it was like, whoa, this thing's weird, right? Well, I only had the option of using the trackball because I unplugged my other mouse, right? Now I had to just use the trackball. Within a few hours that first day, I was getting comfortable. Within a week, I loved the trackball. I would never go back to the other mouse. Within a month, hell, I'm playing first-person shooters on my trackball. And I'm talking about the Kensington Expert, this big-ass trackball. Get it in camera, right? This thing, not a gaming trackball, right? So not it, but I'm comfortable with it enough. When you guys see me play 0 AD, like on video the other day, that was done on a trackball, right? I keep a regular mouse around just in case I ever need it, like if the trackball really gives me fits on something. But I've honestly gotten so used to this trackball, I don't even think about it anymore. Like if I pulled up Steam and Call of Duty or something like that, it's been a long time since I played something like that, but I'd play it on the trackball, or I'd at least try to. Back to the chat here. Low spec Linux laptop, how you doing, sir? It says trackball for the win. I finally got arcade trackball. I'm familiar with that one. Arcade trackball. Yeah, there's a lot of trackballs out there, but I don't know if that's... Yeah, I don't think I've heard of this one. Let me show you guys some pictures here. Arcade trackball. What in the hell is this? All right, I think I finally found a step too far. Yeah, I don't think I could go there. Just looking at that. You should try FreeBSD. It's awesome. That was Christopher talking to one. Yeah, FreeBSD is not bad. The thing with FreeBSD is hardware support, not horrible, but it's not the Linux kernel, right? So you could run into issues. So it's one of those things, if you install it on some hardware, might work, might not. Software availability could be an issue as well. If you really like gaming, I probably wouldn't switch to any of the BSDs, right? You probably would rather play Steam on Linux, right? Like FreeBSD, we were talking earlier about Gen 2. Should I try Gen 2? Should I switch to Gen 2? Somebody was asking, I forget who. The same thing could be said about FreeBSD. It's much more of a niche kind of operating system targeted at a certain crowd. I would never generally say, yeah, everybody should try FreeBSD. You'll love it, right? That's not the kind of operating system FreeBSD is. For certain people with certain use cases, with certain hardware, FreeBSD could be a great operating system. Quinn B says, I'd actually be curious to see Derek's Steam library. I don't log into Steam very often at all. Probably haven't logged into Steam in at least a month or two. And actually, I know recently I went probably over a year, maybe a year and a half, in between logins to Steam. So I had a lot of updates. But some of the games I know that are in my Steam library, I don't buy that many games because I don't game that often, because I don't log into Steam that often. So it doesn't make sense for me to spend money and buy games knowing I'm never going to play them. But I have City Skylines, I know, installed. That was what I logged in to play the most recently, about a month or two ago. And I've had it. I purchased it a while back, and I've had it for a while. Heck, I don't know what else is in there now that I think about it. I've got like 20 games installed, but again, it's been so long since I logged in and played some of them. I know, the free games like Team Fortress 2. I've played it a lot on Steam, obviously. Most people have. I remember a few years back playing a lot of Serious Sam 3, so I own it. I know it's in my library. I haven't played it in a long time, though. But that was a great game. Used to play a lot of Ballistic Overkill on Steam, but I think that game is a dead game now as far as the multiplayer online portion of it. But that was a great multiplayer first-person shooter. I've even played it a few times on live streams. Ballistic Overkill was a great game. But these days, just because I don't game that much, and there's some good free and open source games, like if I feel like a first-person shooter, well, why log into Steam when I can just fire up Xonotic, right? Why worry about updating my stuff on Steam and remembering my password? Xonotic. Like if I'm in the mood for a free and open source shooter, Xonotic. Or several others. I mean, there's Sour Broughton, which I actually do like to play every now and then too. What's some of the other ones I've played on camera recently? Open Arena, Unvanquished was another I played recently on video. You guys have seen me play all of these games or do videos on all these games. The first-person shooters. If I want real-time strategy, I play a lot of Zero AD. And with the new release of Zero AD this past week, I have spent a few hours playing some Zero AD just to see some of the changes, because the gameplay and stuff has changed a little bit. I fired up a Zero AD probably half a dozen times here in the last 4 or 5 days. And I just played a quick 1v1 match against the very hard AI. Mainly just to spot any kind of differences. Another super chat here from Felipe. It says, hey DT, I'd love to see a distro recommendation for digital inclusion. I volunteer on a project in Brazil where we teach poor children to use computers. Basic skills like browsing, spreadsheets, and Word. So if you're teaching children basic computer skills and you want like a standard suite of software, the good thing is most general purpose Linux distributions have you covered there. Now, if you want some that were geared specifically toward educating children, I don't know how old the children are you were that you're teaching, but I haven't looked at it lately. But Endless OS. Let me go to my desktop here. I don't know if it's even, it's barely in the top 100 on DistroWatch, but there is Endless. Get to their webpage here, endlessos.com. So this is designed to be an operating system for children or not like small children, but it's for education. The desktop environment and the apps and everything. It's also designed to be a really, really big download. The last time I took a look at it, the ISO size was like 16 gigs or 18 gigs or something. That was a couple of years ago, the last time I looked at it. Because it's designed also to be, hey, if you don't have internet, everything is on this gigantic ISO after you already install it. I think it comes with its own like version of Wikipedia or some kind of encyclopedia set of PDFs where kids can, look up definitions and encyclopedia articles and everything without needing to be connected to the internet. So Endless OS is actually a pretty fascinating distribution in that regard, as far as that's the target audience is typically kids, and typically in developing countries without internet, or some poor internet at least. But honestly, if you're just looking for kind of like a general purpose distribution for kids to teach them how to use a computer, how to use a web browser and spreadsheets and things like that, honestly, I would just install mainline Ubuntu. Is probably what I would go with, just because it's not very big as far as mainline Ubuntu. It's not a bloated distribution, right? It's pretty small install size. It installs a basic suite of applications as far as web browser. It does install an Office suite, and some other basic tools. And of course, you could always install extra tools if you needed. Like, I know it doesn't come with any graphics kinds of tools out of the box, so no GIMP or Inkscape or Critter or anything like that. So Ubuntu may be a little too minimal depending on how many programs you want installed out of the box already on that machine for these kids. But Ubuntu, though, the environment itself is very simple and easy to use as far as the panel, or the side dock with all the applications pinned or whatever. I think it's one of those desktop environments that you'd spend the least amount of time trying to explain to kids how to work, or where certain settings are for certain things. I probably wouldn't educate kids, for example, on a distribution that shipped with KDE Plasma out of the box. I think Plasma, just trying to keep things as simple as possible. Plasma is probably a little too overwhelming for the new user, especially for the new users that's not really trying to do any kind of deep dive and actually learn about the desktop environment in particular, just computing in general. Low spec Linux laptop says Ubuntu with XFCE, actually. So it's basically an even lighter Ubuntu, but still a very friendly desktop environment. And of course, it always go Lubuntu with LXQt, but any of the main Ubuntu editions probably be all right. Let's see. ADT revived a 32-bit potato with Debian. My custom desktop, my custom open box. Thank you, Baldy. Okay, I don't know who Baldy is. Have to update to SID for some packages. Your thoughts on Debian SID compared to Arch? Debian SID compared to Arch. I've run both, obviously. I would say, as a person, that if you want to run a rolling release distribution and your options are Debian SID or Arch, like that, we're discounting everything else, I would definitely go to Arch. And I say that because Debian SID, it's a branch of Debian, but it's not like the Debian. It's not the Debian people are supposed to run, right? If you're running Debian, you're supposed to be on Debian stable. Think of Debian SID as a testing ground, although they have a testing branch too, right? They have 3 branches. You have stable, testing, and then unstable. That's what SID is called, right? Unstable. And also you got to think, you switch to the unstable branch of Debian, and then you go to the Debian forums or IRC or whatever. I'm having problems with Debian unstable, right? Debian SID, this broke, that broke. Are they going to be that receptive to you for running the unstable branch of Debian? Is Debian unstable a first-class citizen in Debian? Not really. It's different with Arch, because Arch is, you're not running an unstable branch of Arch. There's no stable, testing, unstable. There's just one Arch, and everybody's on it. Right? There's only one Arch. Everybody's running the same Arch. And in a lot of ways, Arch probably would be more stable, to be honest, than Debian Unstable. Because Debian Unstable is not designed to be stable, right? They even call it Debian Unstable, right? Now, all that being said, if you want to try and run SID, as your main distribution, go ahead. I've run it. And I've had things break on it. I've had things break on Arch too. Just again, Arch is kind of designed to be a rolling release distribution. Everybody runs the rolling release distribution, where Debian Unstable is kind of this own weird separate thing from like 99.9% of the people that run Debian are running Debian stable, right? They're not running Debian Unstable. Also, you do have some bonus points with Arch because you get the AUR, of course. Although Debian has plenty of software in the repositories, and then with things like snaps and flatpaks and app images, it's less of an issue as far as, am I going to have problems finding certain software? With Debian and Arch, you're probably going to be able to find all the software you want. But the AUR is still a nice, comfortable kind of feature, right? It's certainly easier to use than something like snaps, flatpaks, and app images, right? Back to the chat here. Let's see. DT, I saw your video on Cube Browser. Have you done one for Falcon Browser? I have not. I have actually not looked at Falcon in a long time personally. But to be honest, I'm not sure. I don't know. Like things like Falcon, also the GNOME folks with Epiphany. I've had people ask me about Epiphany. I mean, you don't see a lot of people running these browsers, right? And think about how many millions and millions of people, especially with GNOME and KDE, are running those desktop environments. You would think the default browser on those desktop environments, if they were any good, people would use them. Do you know anybody that uses Epiphany on GNOME? Hell, do you know a Linux distribution that ships GNOME as its default desktop environment that even ships Epiphany? That's another thing. It's very rare you even find them actually ship Epiphany, right? They typically rip that thing out, even though it's part of the default suite of applications for GNOME, supposed to be. Now, let's rip that out and actually put in a good browser like Firefox, right? Same thing with Falcon. Yeah. I think, I don't want to say that people waste their time developing certain pieces of software, but I think when it comes to some of the web browsers out there in the free and open source space, some of them, I'm not going to say that they shouldn't exist or people should stop working on them. I'm just going to say some of them are just bad, though. I mean, just performance-wise and just feature-wise. Some of them are just really, really bad. Of course, we're picking on Epiphany and Falcon right now. I could say the same thing about Midori. I haven't actually used Midori in a long time either. But I have used it, and I know it's not good. Even things like Suckless's Surf browser, which is a WebKit browser, right? Slow and just, I don't know. It is hard to use any browser that doesn't have a large team of developers around it. And usually a large team of developers means a company behind it. Like there's obviously a reason Google and Chrome exist, right? And Mozilla and Firefox, right? Mozilla's been around forever, and Firefox was actually the biggest, most popular browser on the planet 20 years ago. It's lost a lot of ground to Chrome over the years. Microsoft, of course, had Internet Explorer and Edge, and Apple's got Safari. But when you think of community-based distribution or community-based browsers, right? Can you think of any that are good, have any popularity at all? I mean, in the last couple of years, Brave has exploded in popularity. Brave has company behind it, a corporation behind it. The founder of Brave and the company behind Brave was actually a founder of Mozilla. He was the CEO of Mozilla at one time. I think he was also the guy that created the JavaScript program, or one of the guys behind that. He's done a lot of stuff, right? And there's a company behind it, right? These are not just somebody one day, I'm going to create a browser, right? He's done it before. Browsers are just such big, complicated pieces of software. One of those things. I know a lot of people don't like the fact that pretty much all you have is Chrome and Firefox, right? And things based off of Chrome and Firefox. People want more web engines. And well, why don't we just create one? Well, yeah, why don't we? Well, because it's not easy, right? It's complicated as hell. And unless you've got a lot of developers and a lot of money behind something, you just can't do it. You just can't recreate another web browser like Chrome and Firefox from the ground up. Or like developing everything, the engine and the UI and everything from the ground up. I don't think that could be a community project at this point. I think the web and thus web browsers have become so bloated, so massive. That's preventing that from ever happening. At least with this version of the web. Now, once we create a new, slimmed down, more minimal version of the web, then maybe things will be different. DT, what about Vivaldi? Well, Vivaldi is proprietary software, so I wouldn't use it. As far as Vivaldi has a company behind it, has some money behind it, and that's how they're able to develop things. Yeah, I mean, that goes to my argument a minute ago. Yeah, it's not just, a handful of folks that wanted to create something, right? It's got some real money behind it, real company behind it. Unfortunately, it's proprietary software, and if you're talking about switching away from things like Google Chrome to something else, if you're actually trying to get away from a piece of proprietary software like Chrome, for example, it doesn't make sense to go to another proprietary web browser. I would hope people would explore some of the really fantastic free and open source alternatives like Firefox and Brave and LibreWolf, Qt Browser if you like something keyboard driven. I love Qt Browser. Some of the other ones out there, there's a ton of free and open source browsers. Hell, GNU IceCat, right? I'd run GNU IceCat before I ran Vivaldi. Let's see. 1. DT, do you code at all? Occasionally, you'll see me write some code on camera. 1. Are you new to the channel? I'm not a professional developer, programmer, or anything like that. Do I know how to write some lines of code in various programming languages? Yes. I know a little bit about a lot of different languages. Just a little bit, right? I'm not that comfortable in too many languages, though. Pretty comfortable, obviously. You guys see me. If I pulled up something, let's create a bash script today. I could pull up Emacs and we could start scripting something. I come up with some random problem in my head. Let's create a dmenu script to solve this problem. You guys see me do that on camera. So bash scripting, pretty comfortable with. As far as Python, I don't do a lot with Python. It's one of those languages I probably should spend time learning more, because I know a lot of people are interested in Python. Haskell, obviously, I've spent the most time in here lately. You guys have seen me do a lot with Haskell on the channel. As I use Emacs more and more, get more and more comfortable with Emacs lists, but I don't. Most of the stuff I do with Emacs lists is mainly just configuring Emacs. I'm not actually writing my own Emacs plugins, my own Emacs list programs, although I wouldn't mind exploring some of that. The more, though, I learn about Emacs Lisp, I do like the language. I mean, I can open up anything, any kind of config file in Python or in Lua. Hell, sometimes I can open up C source code and I can kind of figure out what's going on and things and manipulate it. But would I start something from scratch, for example, and write it in C? No, I don't know enough C to. I haven't explored that. But it's one of those things most people, once you've learned a little bit about programming any language, and especially once you've learned a little bit in 2 or 3 different languages, you see similarities in others. So usually I can open up a program or a script that's written in a language I've never used before sometimes, but usually I can spot what's going on because a lot of times they're all structured the same way, or not all programming languages are structured the same way, but if you've played with enough different ones, you'll be like, oh, this looks very Lisp-like, for example. There's a ton of different Lisp variants out there, and they all kind of look alike. Like if you knew one, you could probably figure out what's going on in some of the others, right? But no, I'm not a professional programmer or developer. I've never worked as such. And I really don't have any interest in being in that line of work, which is why I don't really dive deep into that stuff. I would just be learning it for no real reason, because I would never use it in real life as far as a job, for example. Could I learn it? Yeah. Could I be a successful programmer or developer? I probably could. Like I've got that kind of mind. Yeah, I could learn. Yeah. It's just not something I'd want to do. I like making videos. I really like making video content, and not just Linux video content. It's not necessarily Linux is just something I do in life. I'm passionate about free and open source software, but it's one of the things I really enjoyed learning how to make videos. I like video editing, audio editing. I like cameras and microphones and things like that. Why I think this is what I want to do. Probably what I'll keep doing. Maybe not necessarily always on Linux, maybe other topics, maybe other channels. Obviously, channels come and go. You see that all the time. Certainly, my channel is going to suffer the same fate as all other YouTube channels at some point, right? Where, I got nothing else to say, or I'm just tired of doing this. I'll move on to something else, or maybe YouTube will just blow up one day. Yeah, it just disappears. It's gone. Yeah. But that's fine. I'll still have all of my audio video equipment, and I'll still keep doing it, right? It's one of the things about doing this kind of work too. It's recession proof, right? I don't care if the stock market's crashing today or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? Pandemic proof, because the entire country is locked down. Doesn't affect this, right? Right. Let's see. Zero Linux. You just had coffee. You seem chipper. What gave it away? The Linux Cast. Matt says, congrats on the 200K DT. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that, buddy. All right. Let's see. We've been going for nearly 2 hours, 1 hour and 45 minutes. We're going to give this another 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to call it a day. I like to keep I actually did not realize I'd been talking that long. I was only going to go for 90 minutes because for this stream to eventually get synced to Odyssey, if I go over a time limit or a certain file size, it messes up the Odyssey sync, and I'd like for this to also be published on Odyssey. So let's say I'm going to go for another 6 or 7 minutes. So if you got any questions or comments you want to get them in now. Any super chats you want to get in. I know we still got a lot of people here in the chat. I do apologize. I know a lot of questions were asked, and I went on a bit of a ramble on some of these topics. So, all right. Yeah, Hink says, I hope Odyssey properly takes YouTube's place. I don't know. We need competition, though. It doesn't all need to be on one platform. That's the only problem. And one of the things with social media platforms of all kinds, not just video social media, but things like Twitter and Facebook. You get these things where everybody feels like they all have to be on the same platform because everybody's on the same platform. I want to talk to everybody, and everybody's on the one same platform. We can't be on two different platforms, and I think that's unfortunate. I think that's one of the things that has really completely screwed up the internet. So everybody thinks they all have to be in the same place, and therefore there's no competition. Facebook kind of explodes on the scene. Is Facebook great? No, but once people start signing up to Facebook, well, this buddy of mine is on Facebook. I got to be on Facebook. And then the next thing you know, everybody's got to be on Facebook. Even when alternative platforms come up, they're never going to succeed because I can't leave Facebook because all my buddies are on Facebook. The same thing with Twitter, same thing with YouTube. When it comes to video content, I can't leave YouTube because everybody that watches video content has a YouTube account. Right there. That's where they go to watch videos. I think, but I do think that's unfortunate. I do think it will change, though. I think you kind of see it already with platforms like Twitter, like Facebook. They're not as popular as they once were, and you're starting to see people complain in general about social media and social networking and just that whole model. And also the negative impact that it has on people, which is a totally different topic that I've ranted on enough in past videos about. I'm not going to get into that today. DT, what do you think about DistroBox? Did you try it out? I have tried it out a little bit. I haven't done anything on camera. Yeah, it's neat. It's a neat way to spin up a little Docker image of various distributions, right? I tried it out about 2 months ago. And I played with it, I don't know, for a couple hours one afternoon, just goofing off. I think I spun up like an Ubuntu box and a Fedora and installed some programs in each. Played around a little bit. It's a neat little program. It's not something that I have a use for. It's just being a desktop Linux user. Because obviously for the kind of stuff I would do, I just spin up a virtual machine, right? That makes a lot more sense. I don't know, for people that actually work with servers, things like that, probably makes a lot more sense. That's one of the things. There's so much Linux technology out there designed for servers and the server space. And there's a lot of neat stuff. People ask me all the time about things I've never used and probably would never take the time to even learn about. Hey, DT, why don't you do something with Kubernetes, Ansible, or Chef, and all of this stuff? And it's like, well, I'm really a desktop Linux user. And I make videos geared toward people using desktop Linux. And it's like, I don't know. Why would I learn these things? It would be something I would spend time learning some of this stuff, and literally I would never use it past the point of learning it to make a video. And typically I don't do that kind of content. I've made so many videos, but I rarely learn something just to make a video about it. Right? If by doing a video about something, it's something new and I'm just learning about it, it's because it interests me, right? Like the Haskell videos, right? Why am I learning Haskell, right? I didn't learn Haskell to make a video about it. So it genuinely interests me. I know that not many people are that interested in Haskell, but you know what? It doesn't matter. If it interests me, I'm going to learn it. And if I learn it and I make a video about it, great. Yeah, I don't want to, one of the things with making video content, if you start making videos that you don't want to make, it comes across on camera. Right? It really does. Learning stuff that you have absolutely no use for. And it's like you're miserable talking about it on camera, and people can tell, oh, this guy, he really hates making this video. I don't want to be that guy. See, hey DT, nowadays Odyssey stopped working. Tried on Firefox and Brave. Neither thumbnails nor videos load on Odyssey. Anyone else face the same issue? No, I check out Odyssey every day. Obviously, being a content creator on Odyssey as well, I have not had any issues at all. It's probably was a random glitch that happened on your particular web browser, and maybe try clearing the cache on your web browser. There's nothing wrong with Odyssey. I just pulled it up. I should have showed you on camera just to verify that. Click on Odyssey. Yeah, there's the thumbnails. There's my channel. And it popped up really fast, too. Like it's kind of speedy today, right? Even the front page, which has a lot of stuff going on it. As I scroll, we'll get more things that have to pop up. But yeah. Loading really nicely, really fast. Yeah. Cool. If that is not happening for you, yeah, I don't know. There's something on your end, right? It's definitely not Odyssey. All right, let me catch up with the chat here. Go for just another minute. So this will just be the last couple of questions here. Let's see. Yes, Slalom says, I do a lot of Ansible these days. I'm sure it involves your work in some way, probably. Yazzer says, Haskell superiority. Absolutely. Mike Brown says, keep up the great work. Appreciate that, Mike. Martin says, you mentioned that you have a lot of software on your main machine because of the channel. Is there a reason why you don't test on virtual machines and keep your system minimal? A lot of the stuff I have installed, Martin, I don't mind testing some things in virtual machines. I don't mind testing most things in virtual machines. But the problem is window managers. And I've done so many window manager content on the channel. I don't like doing those on virtual machines. I much prefer actually spending time, especially if you're going to spend hours in something, configuring it and tweaking it on physical hardware. Also, window managers inside virtual machines sometimes have weird issues, especially once I've got a window manager that I use all the time. Then I've got a virtual machine running a window manager. The mod key in all my window managers is super. The super key is going to conflict with the host machine and the virtual machine because I'm going to be doing things thinking I'm in the virtual machine and I'm not. I'm on the host machine. So I think I'm going to hit super shift Q to quit, for example, in the virtual machine to kill the window manager in the virtual machine. But the window didn't have focus or whatever. It was actually in my host machine. I just killed my host machine, my window manager. And virtual machines have real issues with the mod key being the same on the host machine and the virtual machine. So the only really convenient way to make that not to the point where you're wanting to pull your hair out, especially when you're dragging windows around and stuff, you have to change the mod key in the virtual machine. So the host machine needs to be super and the virtual machine mod key needs to be alt, or vice versa. They can't be the same key. So really, it's just more convenient with the window managers. Once you install 15 different window managers, then you've got 15 different programming languages and all their libraries installed on your system. That's how you get to whatever 2100 packages or whatever I've got installed via Pacman. Yeah, Zero Linux says, I created Odyssey account, but I can't sync my YouTube. They do have a subscriber limit. I think you gotta have 300 subscribers on YouTube to sync to Odyssey for the free sync. But some people do have issues where even sometimes after they sign up, the sync never gets started properly. If you contact the Odyssey guys, they have a Discord, I think. And it's pretty active. And there are people that are always there to help out. They can actually, you can tell them you're having a problem with the sync and they can make that happen for you. I haven't done it myself, but I know a lot of people that have had issues with getting set up and getting the sync going. And the trick is just going and ask the Odyssey guys to, hey, what's the problem? Can you help out? All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and shut it down for the day. Try to keep this under 2 hours. That way, hopefully, the Odyssey sync does work. I do appreciate we still have like 130 people hanging out in the YouTube chat today. I do appreciate you guys hanging out with me here this afternoon. And again, I know you guys enjoy these kinds of Q&A solo live streams and just me hanging out, chatting with you guys. I used to do these on a much more regular basis. A couple years ago, I just kind of quit doing them. I did one a couple of weeks ago. You guys wanted more. That's why I'm doing today's. I may try to keep up with more of these. At least, give you guys a couple of these a month. I think, surely I could commit to that. So you'll probably be getting another one of these, I don't know, shortly. And maybe I'll test out the network at the office next time I do one of these to see if I can actually start streaming from the office again. I haven't been able to do that in a while. Before I go, I need to thank, of course, the patrons. So let's go ahead and thank the producers: Gabe, James, Matt, Maxim, Mehmet, Mitchell, Paul, Wes, Why You Bald, Homie, Alex, Armor Dragon, Chuck, Commander Harry, Dayokai, George, Lee, Marstrom, Nate, Arion, Alexander, Paul, Peace Argent, Fedor, Polytech Realities for Less, Red Prophet, Roland, Steven, Tools, Devler, and Willie. These guys, they're my highest tier patrons over on Patreon. Without these guys, this live stream would not have been possible. The show is also brought to you by each and every one of these fine ladies and gentlemen. All these names you're seeing on the screen right now. These are all my supporters over on Patreon because I don't have any corporate sponsors. You guys know the rest. I'm sponsored by you guys, the community. If you'd like to see more videos, more live streams about Linux, free and open source software, subscribe to DistroTube over on Patreon. Peace. You guys didn't say